Hey, welcome to the New Left. This is Etienne like usual, and this is video number 4. This time, I think it's important for us to then focus now on, we're talking about the leftist philosophy regarding economics, our economic philosophy. I think there's three forms of leftist economic philosophy. Okay, let's start off with the most centrist of those. The most centrist would be the liberal position. When I say liberal, I don't mean social liberal. I mean economic liberal, meaning free markets, open markets. And then we move to the social democratic. This is what you would call center left, right? FDR, JFK, LBJ, these are all center-left politicians. And some would even consider them centrists, more like just pure centrists. But in modern day, they're kind of like center-left in our political spectrum. Then after that, you have just socialists, like in general, even though everybody on the left side economically are socialists and everybody on the right side are capitalists, right? But in general, we're saying like democratic socialists, Norway-style socialists, Dutch-style socialism, Nordic-style socialism, right? So this is just basically still a market-style government, economy, but then you have basically regulations, and also you will have stronger labor rights. They don't have minimum wage in most of these Dutch countries, but they have a very strong labor structure there, so they get high pay. So there's a lot of ways you can do it, right? You can get a good pay for workers and stuff like that. And then you have communism, which is pure government control over the whole system. And you put some people at the top to decide how basically resources and different things are spread throughout the economy. I think and also you have two forms of communism as well. I'll get to that in the end. So let's start off with the liberal idea. You can say, okay, these people want a free market. They believe that private property is the absolute way to go. The government should have no power over controlling different property rights. They also strongly believe in low regulation and controlling of businesses. So you talk about wage, different stuff like that, right? Now, just because you're on the left end economically does not mean you're on the left end socially, okay? This is where social liberals come in and right-wing conservatives, right? You can be also a left-wing economically, but a conservative socially, okay? But we're not going to get into those groups today. We're focusing purely on economics. But I just wanted to mention that so you don't get confused about these things. Okay, so that's economic liberals, right? Which now you can even get into neoliberals. This is the same group, but neoliberals, unlike original liberals, economic liberals, neoliberals believe in actual more authoritarianism, using more government control to do these things. As in old school, like liberals were more libertarian, and they believed that people should do these things because of their own choice, right? And that's more connection with the classical. That's why now we call those classical liberals, and we call neoliberals, like modern day liberals, Hillary Clinton, so on and so forth, Obama. Now, they're not evil or anything, but they tend to think that even if a corporation is evil or a corporation is good, it is the market that will decide. This is where we start to differ, right? Where now we move on into the social democratic, right? Why do they call them social democratic? Because they're socialists, but they believe democracy is the main choice, is the main control. the main force behind everything, right? And I'll explain what's the difference between them and democratic socialists. Okay. So social democracy, social democrats, essentially they are a little bit to the left of the liberals. They believe in the markets, but you couldn't even say that they believe in free markets. They believe in a controlled market with regulations. And sometimes that can have factors. That can have factors that affect the economy negatively. And a perfect example of that is the minimum wage, right? For example, we can raise the minimum wage to 15 and we can raise the minimum wage to $20, right? But the problem is that we always forget is the people at the bottom, the lowest rung people who don't have education, or because of racism or sexism, they won't get the opportunity to learn. Because sometimes when you take a low job for just almost nothing, it allows you to grow and learn in that field. And if you learn something and you're able to show your skills, sometimes that will help you get further in that field. Even though you don't get the big salary at the beginning, you're getting a foot in the door. Another thing is it hurts small business people. It really does. You can argue any way you want to. It does. Now, the question is, will the money that goes to the workers who get that actual wage increase, will that money go back into the economy and help the small business owner or whatnot? That's another issue that's separated for something like minimum wage, because the issue then is and it's different from regulation as well, because the issue then is it's about redistribution, which shouldn't be a scary word to mention, right? Now, it's one thing if you're talking about taking money from one people and giving it to another. That's not redistribution. That's what they're trying to make it sound like. But redistribution is you have a certain way things distribute and go through the economy, and you're changing how those things flow through the economy. One example of redistribution is maybe we might go to the banks and say, hey, because basically the government gives the banks and everything most of the money. We might tell them, hey, you know what? We want you to make sure that 40% of the money you give goes to local businesses, small businesses. Only 60% of the money can go to, corporations. And out of that 60%, a very small fraction can go to like those investment groups. They have to make their own private banks to do all these kind of like mortgage-backed securities and all this kind of like exotic financial vehicles. Now, that's social democracy. Then we have a democratic socialist, right? And again, all these groups are socialists, point blank. It's just different versions of socialism. That's what we have to start understanding. Communists are socialists as well. Now, let's talk about democratic socialists. Now, what makes democratic socialists different than social democrats? Well, social democrats honestly are the beginning of a democratic socialist. Now, what does that mean? Basically, social democrats are leading the way to create a democratic socialist society. A society where socialism, which is the idea that we want an equal economic system that looks at the socio-economic aspects of an economic relationship rather than just the capital aspects or the business aspects or the supply side. We're looking at the demand side here. So what the thing is they want workers to have the controls of production, right? They want to have the power over production. Now, if I start a small business and we all are owners in that business, and we own a factory, and that factory is also owned by the city, is that democratic socialism? Yes. Now, how's that different in social democracy? Well, social democracy still allows you to have absolute private property. What democratic socialism does is go to another level and say, now, literally, the people who work and do most of the work and put all these things together, they have more power. And you, as the capitalist, as the investor, you are just now a cog in their machine. Basically, the people who do all the work, makes all of the actual products, control the profits at the end, and the profiteers negotiate with the workers and negotiate with the producers, because Elon Musk would be a producer in this case, so don't be fooled. But who would be basically the capitalist? The capitalist would be Wall Street and everybody who are putting money into Wall Street and buying stocks or whatnot. Now, if Elon Musk want to buy somebody else's company pieces of it, shares, he will be the capitalist. But for his company, Tesla, SpaceX, he would be a part of the producers in this situation. But he would have to figure out how to share democratically with his employees, but also they wouldn't really be seen as employees. They would be seen as investors, founders in his business with him. So you see how that totally shifts everything? But do you still own your house? Yeah, you still own a house. Do you still own a car if you want to? Yes, you still own a car. Can private businesses still exist? Yes, private businesses still exist. Do you still vote for elections and do all that normal stuff? Yeah, none of that changes. So that's democratic socialism. That's why the main people are scared of democratic socialism are business owners, because they're afraid that, I won't own everything over my business and control everybody anymore. Okay. That then takes us to the next group, which is basically communists. Okay. And I told you there's two types of communists, didn't I? Okay. Let's talk about the first style of communists, which is the one we all know, authoritarian communism. This is what we've seen in China in the past, and this is what we've also seen with Russia in the past. They're not currently like this anymore. The closest thing to this kind of authoritarian communism is North Korea, but they are not honestly a communist country. They are like a dictatorship that is badly managed. They are more like the Nazis or like the Russians in the 1940s and 50s, okay? They are nothing like, China in the 1950s or even like Russia in the 60s and 70s, okay? So we have to make that comparison. So it's more, North Korea is more of a dictatorship and totalitarian type regime and governmental structure. But what we tend to see with authoritarian communist type of government is we tend to see this structure at the top which controls everything, and you have a very small group of people making all the decisions. This is why you might not even call this left. You might see this as a right-wing type of situation, which I would say it is. Why? Because it's not democratic. So we need to start making that clear. It is not democratic at all. And it is not even honestly left-wing as an economic philosophy, because basically most of the stuff that comes out of these economies don't go to people, all the people. It just goes mostly to the people at the top and whatever they're trying to do, if it's war, if it's industrial growth, whatever. So that should change our view on calling them left, economically or socially. They're not, okay? And if you look at history from like the Soviet Union, they tended to view people left-wing as people like in America, not Russians. In the Western world as left-wing, which is like capitalist, okay? Let's then switch on to look at what we call libertarian communism, right? The leftist, real leftist communism, which is more like hippies, okay? You ever see those hippies who like they live on the same farm and they eat the same food on the farm, and they might be vegan or vegetarians, and they might have meat as well, but it's all like kosher, well taken care of. They have certain situations where how they control the animals. Everything that they wear, everything that they cook was all made by them. That is basically communism. The real communism. We have never really had a governmental style communism. I don't think you can ever really have that, because you'll always end up with a small group of people making all of the decisions. See, now you can have anarchism, and you can have anarcho-syndicalism and anarcho-capitalism. right? These are not economic philosophies. These are more like governmental philosophies, so that's why I didn't really add them in today's conversation. Because basically all they want is no power at all, no government restraints. And really the difference between the two groups is where they're coming at. Should there be a possibility of industry and hierarchies or not? Pure anarchists, anarchist syndicalists, they don't believe in a hierarchy. They believe in a vertical system. Anarcho-capitalists, they purely believe in a capitalist system with a hierarchy with some rich guy at the top or powerful guy at the top. That's just simplify all that for you right there. Now, let's shift in and say, what is the new left, the modern day economic philosophy for us on the left? The modern day economic philosophy should be a mix of three things. Number one, it should be a mix of a liberal view, because we do want some free markets. We want some economic choice out there, and we want some flexibility for corporations. We want a mixture of the social democratic philosophy as well, and then the democratic socialist philosophy. And really, what we really doing is creating stages. This is a little in connection with what Marx was talking about. Stages to a communist state. But we don't really want a communist state. We want something like Star Trek. Something like where everybody, like think about 3D printers, a lot like what they call in Star Trek replicators. Now what replicators do is you can just push in there and say, hey, give me a Starbucks coffee. And it will create a Starbucks coffee for you. You can say, make me this kind of t-shirt. It'll make that t-shirt. That's a lot like 3D printers, right? But they're not that advanced as a replicator. But that's where we're going towards. And when we get to that kind of world where almost anything can be replicated or created in like computers and information is so vast that it doesn't really matter about what you want because we can create it. And when we're going out into space and we're finding new land and new planets and new places every single day, planets that don't even have people on it might have land, water, and even organics and life there, but it might not even have any intelligent species there. So we are approaching the world that we viewed in Star Trek and in movies. But it's up to us to actually guide us towards that way, using everything I told you, because all the great masters over time put these things before us. Starting with some of the guys that we view today as right-wing, but they're not really right-wing. I told you this before. They're socialists like John Adams, people like that. They are socialists, okay? They said it before. They just basically look at capitalism as a science and then explain how markets and stuff work. They're not giving you their opinion. This is where you have to realize the two things. But we're going to get there. We just got to move in the phases. And right now, the U.S. should be seen as a social democracy, but we're not right now. But we're pulling us back to a social democracy, and people like Ocasio-Cortez and the Justice Democrats, we're going to push us right into democratic socialism. And then you know what? When all this technology and all these advancements come and Silicon Valley takes us to the future, then you're going to be seeing us going into the 21st century communist world, where basically people like Marx was talking about, and people said it was going to be impossible, and you're only going to be working 10 hours a week. So, I hope you enjoyed the conversation, this episode, this video. Nothing really else to tell you guys, and just stay in tune, know what's going on, and I'll see you guys next time.